Truly African. Truly African. Truly African. Truly African. Truly African.
On November 5, 2024, Donald John Trump decisively and resoundingly defeated Kamala Harris in elections to emerge as the 47th president-elect of the United States of America. Now, the 78-year-old who served as president from the year 2017 through to 2021 is also the second office holder after Stephen Grover Cleveland to win non-consecutive terms. Now, Trump is due to be sworn in as president for a 4-year term on January 20, 2025. Now, the question is, Mr. Trump is known for his unpredictability and an orthodox approach to leadership, but are there clues to what's in the pipeline based on his first term in office? That is the question we are asking. On the show, we are looking at America's foreign policy with regards to Mr. Trump's administration. How is his presidency for the second time affecting the African continent? And my guest is already seated, so we will be delving into the conversation very soon. But let me officially welcome you to Diplomatic Affairs, the only show that brings you happenings in the world of diplomacy and international relations. My name is Harriet Nartey. I'll take a break. When I come back, we delve into the conversation. Welcome back. The show is Diplomatic Affairs. My name is Harriet Nartey. This is the only show that brings you happenings in the world of diplomacy and international relations. We make it a point to get you the resource persons, the right ones, who can actually share their insights on all the issues, current affairs, global issues, international relations, everything around the subjects, diplomacy and international relations. And today, this is one of the missions we have as we come on your screens wherever you find yourself. You can also watch Pan-African television on our YouTube and Facebook platforms. We are streaming live, so at this moment, wherever you find yourself, like I always say, you can catch up with us and get to know what is happening in this area. I'm going to introduce my guest to you. He's not new to this platform, given the fact that he is an international journalist also. He's very familiar when it comes to the media space, and he's very vocal when it comes to political and social issues. There is more to him than you probably know, so I will be talking about him. He is a human rights activist, social entrepreneur, international relations analyst, and host of Carrefour African, and he will be telling us briefly what his platform actually does. And so his program also airs on the platforms of Pan-African television. He will give us the details in a bit. So we'll be talking about, I am thrilled to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. I know it was a very short notice, but you had to push a few things and make this a priority. We really appreciate it. So finally, there's a popular phrase that says, when America sneezes, the world catches cold. Now, I don't know from where you sit whether America indeed has sneezed and whether world leaders have called as we speak. But from where you sit, I noticed that I've been monitoring. America has kept the world on edge for some days. Finally, I don't know if it is right for me to state that I think we can all breathe at this moment. I want us to look at where we are coming from. When I talk about where we are coming from, where the world is right now with Trump's or Mr. Trump's election as the new leader to govern the biggest country, that is the United States of America. So, have you been monitoring social media? Are you picking information on Trump's win?
I mean, it's very difficult to gauge on social media the real sentiment on the ground in the United States because those things can be manipulated. I mean, think about it, right? One of the surrogate for Trump, Elon Musk, controls one of the biggest social media affecting the minds of the way of life in the United States, the X, which we all also are using across the African continent. But what is clear is that there is a large segment in the United States who feel that they are not represented with the Trump win, right? This new Trump presidency. And the numbers show it, right? It's almost half and half, right? 51-49. The percentage are very close to one another, that you are witnessing a divided United States. And I could even make a comparison when you look at the result is similar to what happened in Brazil with Lula, that Lula did not win with a sweeping majority, that you could sense that within Brazil there is a division amongst the people, and that's the sentiment also that's also appearing slowly on social media. But what to retain from the first quote you mentioned about the U.S. position in the world, the U.S. is a country, if you look at the world as a body, right, that whatever happens there does affect the world, but you also know that without a heart, the head cannot do much, right? That I feel that the heart of the world is the African continent, that U.S. supremacy and U.S. position in the world is mostly from Africa's resources. And you saw that under the Biden administration. You know, there were a few policies implemented around control of African resources, one of them being the renovation or the rebuilding of the Lobito corridor that connects Angola, Zambia, and DRC for the main purpose of getting access to copper, right? So that if the United States is using taxpayers' money to fund such projects, you now understand the importance of Africa. So the sneezing, while it's a cold, they'll still be okay. But we, the heart, we on the African continent, have to realize that we actually make the world turn. Not just the United States, but every other superpower around the world needs the African continent. And that's how we on the African continent have to look at this election. That with the new Trump presidency, what is at stake for the African continent? Is it still going to be the status quo, or we'll see some change? And what history has shown us, no matter who is in power in the United States, be it the Democrats or the Republicans, their foreign policy toward Africa has often been the same. Some are much more aggressive, others are not, but it's still the same. Exploitation rather than partnership and so on. But we'll delve into that as we go
we will.
to the show. We
will. And I'm glad you touched on the fact that Africa must know that they make the world turn as well. That means that we have a role to play when it comes to global affairs, when it comes to decision making, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to fighting for the needs of the people. And like you rightly mentioned, we will be delving into that. Now, I want us to talk about three main issues, which I think that actually, would you say that made it easy for Trump to get the nod One will be the economy of the United States of America. I mean, high cost of living, inflation, unemployment, all these issues actually featured in there. And two will be immigration. You know, Trump has been very clear when it comes to his immigration policies, when it comes to protecting the United States of America. And the last one will also be on, so I talked about immigration, I talked about the economy and security, which is also one of the issues that garnered a lot of support and attention by the American electorate. Now, going forward, I would want us to talk about immigration, because when it comes to the economy, it appears the United States of America, and I've always said that no country works in isolation. No country is an island. No matter how small or big they are, we all depend on each other. Countries have become very interdependent now, and that has always been the case. But do you think, based on these thematic issues, are we going to make any headway when it comes to America's interests? Can America just be alone, do this by itself as America?
The way you phrase the question is making me think in a few directions, right? There is the United States of the people and the United States of the corporation. And then there are economic crises in the United States that make the working people of the United States think that the immigrant is their problem, right? So as a billionaire, I always make that joke. I don't think a billionaire cares for the working poor of the United States. It's not logical to me to see him as a billionaire actually worry about the working people. And his track record shows that too. The challenge that we see in the election, I mean, we're talking about it as a challenge, of course, from the Trump that said, this is not a challenge, we actually won the election, right? Is that the way he won the election is by dividing the people of the United States over issues that they actually agree on, if you actually put it forward. For example, the people of the United States want to increase the minimum wage.
Yes.
Right? This is a platform that the Democratic Party has run, but they're actually in power, but they're not actually acting on that issue.
Yes.
Right? Trump is making the enemy of the working people China, speaking about the jobs going to China, but not speaking about the minimum wage. So for him, he's bringing the manufacturing jobs in the United States. But the question is, if you bring that manufacturing job back in the United States, what is happening to the working poor? Will they still be paid $7 an hour, or will they be paid a living wage, right? Because people may not understand when we talking about dollars, what that actually means. Now, someone making $40,000 to $50,000 in the United States is poverty line. Literally, they can't even survive with that. You know, average rent is $3,000 for people, and with $7, you're not making even enough to pay your own rent, you know, after all deduction. So that's how he won, right? So you look at those 3 points, I'm saying that he's not even going to implement those. It was more a tactical methodology for him to become the president of the United States. But then if you look at the numbers, and it's something I was looking at before we started the show, that President-elect Trump, as of today, still have the same numbers of people who supported him in 2020. Right? So when he lost the election in 2020, he had 74 million votes. He won this election by 74 million votes, right? So is this actually a win that should be celebrated, that he won with so much big margin and the popular vote? It's the same number that we are discussing. But what we should look at is, why did the Democrats lose?
Why do you think the Democrats lost the election?
I strongly believe that the reason why they lost is because the Democrats did not come to vote.
They didn't just lose the presidential election. They lost Congress as well.
Yes, but there are things to actually discuss around even the numbers. And I'll use North Carolina. I have a U.S. citizenship, so I vote in the state of North Carolina.
All right.
North Carolina is a Republican state, right? And this election, it was a swing state, meaning that there was a possibility that it could turn blue. For the presidential elections, the people of North Carolina voted for Trump, right? But for the governor's election, they voted for a Democrat. So the new governor of North Carolina is a Democrat, right? And you start looking at the registered voters, the Democratic Party registered voters, you have about 1.4 million of them in North Carolina who could have definitely swung that state in favor of Harris. So when I see those numbers, I'm saying that Democrats in the state of North Carolina did not vote for Harris for president, yet voted for a Democrat for governor.
Right.
And when we even look at the different statistics across the country, you are noticing even on the Republican base, for those who voted for Trump, on some of the policy issue, they voted against Trump policy. One of them is the discussion around Roe v. Wade, giving women the right for abortion, the right to choose for their own bodies, right? That you have about at least five states where, when 5 red states, where people voted for Trump, but on the ballot, because there was a referendum on the question of abortion, people voted yes for the right of women to have abortion, Missouri being one of the states. So the voters this year, I don't think that they went to vote just to support Trump. They voted for certain policies. They voted for Republicans. They voted against the interest. But the numbers clearly shows if Harris received 66, I think the 66 was on election day. Now it's 70 million, right? She has 70 million.
The number has gone up.
Yeah, vote. 70 million vote of Americans, when Biden in 2020 had 81 million, right? What happened to the 6 million who voted? Clearly they did not vote for her, right? So I see that more a failure of the Democratic Party for not, for a few things. One of them is the situation in Palestine, right? The fact that the majority of the Democratic Party members are in support of the ceasefire. I mean, my view is still not the full solution, but the majority of the Democratic Party voters are supporting the ceasefire. Yet, you have a Democratic president who's unable to bring about peace and stability in Palestine. That made some voters say, I'm not voting.
For the Democrats?
Yes, but it doesn't mean that they voted for Trump. So we're clearly seeing that there is a decrease. But then even when you go much closer to the statistics, because some of the things that's been spread in different media platforms, even on social media, about men not voting for Harris. It's not true fully. The statistics are actually showing in the United States that black men voted in majority for her. Black women voted in majority for her as well, including Latinos in the United States. But what has been clearly shown is that white men and white women have voted for Trump, right? So the more we delve, I mean, all of us are analyzing the data that is coming in, but I wouldn't say that this was a major victory with so much people voting for Trump. When I'm comparing the numbers, it seems to have kept his base.
2017 to 2020.
The 2020 election. Yeah, that is now, I would have expected him to even get to 80 million, right? Because people voted for Biden, that's my general sense, is really for the failure of the Trump administration to deal with COVID in 2020. Over 1 million Americans died of COVID. And because of that, and the economic situation, as an effect of COVID and many other issues, American citizens decided not to support him, right? 80 million of them, actually 81 million of them voted for Biden. So I would have assumed that those 81 million people will also show up for Harris, which they didn't. So that's how I will frame the discussion around the three policies. He's a populist, and it will be very hard for him to continue the policy of saying, I'm going to close the borders. When we know we have low wages, we need immigrants. This is a policy of the United States. You know, they are using immigrants, but that's not the discussion. The discussion is, are we going to provide the American people, the U.S. citizens, with a living wage so they can care for the family? That's what the American people are waiting for.
That's what the American people are indeed waiting for. But he had campaigned on the back of the fact that the country is flooded with immigrants. And also, you mentioned America's trading partners. Of course, China is one of the key trading partners when it comes to America and, of course, trade relations and all of that. But people really believed him when he said, I could make the problems go away. The border issue under immigration, people really believed it when he spelled out his policies around immigration, what he intends to do, deportation, building walls and all of that. It seems like that is what America wants, and that's what Americans believe in, because for them, the issues are just the ones that he's pointing out to. And he's been bold about it. He's talked about immigration, what he was going to do or what he's going to do now that he's won. He's talked about the economy, the people, what is actually causing, you know, high cost of living, unemployment, inflation, and affecting America's, you know, everything around economy when it comes to America. He's talked about security, how America is no more safe, and that's also under immigration. But largely when it comes to global affairs, when it comes to multilateralism, one of the things that he's talked about, he's promised bringing peace to the Middle East. He's talked about what is happening between Ukraine and Russia, also resolving the issue in the eastern parts of Europe. He's talked about quite a number of issues when it comes to global affairs as the world is right now. But he's believed to be the one to put an end or bring a solution. Is he the savior of the world?
I wouldn't even speak about the savior of the world, because I think the savior of the world are the people. And that's why I keep saying that in the United States, we have the American people who are struggling, who want to see a better country, and they know what they actually need. And you have the billionaires who are making the decisions for them. With every single rhetoric that you have shared of his campaign, he's speaking to his base, right? And his base, as appointed, has not changed from 2020 to 2024. 74 million people voted for him then, 74 million people are voting for now. We can go into details to see if they are changing demographic and so on. But his base is current, and he has run that rhetoric. Why has he run that rhetoric? He has run that rhetoric because of the failure of the establishment in the United States to provide a good living for Americans. So those who do not have a job, it's easy for them to say, look, the Mexican across the border who's here is the one taking your job, when it's not actually true, right? And I'll use myself as an example. I remember when I first moved to the United States, I went there actually as a refugee when the second war in the Congo started. So that's how I ended up there. And I remember working at McDonald's as one of my first jobs, right? And I think 2 years after I was working there, one of my colleagues at work made a blatant statement that immigrants do not pay taxes. I said, why do you say that? I said, but you guys come, you get a job, and you don't pay taxes. I actually showed him my paycheck. I said, they're taking 30% from my check. So he was misinformed, right? And this rhetoric, and remember I said that it's North Carolina, right? I'm living in North Carolina, it's a southern state, that there are this rhetoric that is presented to people that is untrue. The same thing that we're discussing in the United States is also an issue that may come to the world in Canada. We are living here in Ghana. How many Ghanaians are traveling to Canada? How many of Ghanaians are being actually recruited to go study, to go work? They actually say, you do not need, in some of the advertising that we see here in Accra, that you do not even need a college degree. to go there. So many of our citizens here in Ghana are traveling. They are hardworking. They are not taking anyone's jobs. They are jobs that people are now willing to do that we on the African continent are taking, and we are seen as another. So when there will be an economic crisis in the in Canada, the right wing, not addressing the question of creating jobs and living wage, will actually pin the workers together. Because if the workers see that we have the same battle, that we are the one working, the billionaires are still making the money. The companies are being shipped overseas for cheap labor,
yes,
and not addressing that issue, then we'll be able to actually engage and hold them accountable. So that's the campaign that he has run. Now that he's president, what I do know, at least from what I'm hearing, is he's going to engage with the issue of Ukraine and Russia. He's going to engage in the Middle East. But I have to compare it to what he did before, right? Under his presidency, he moved the United States Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which is a contention for the world. I mean, the African Union even here has a clear position on Palestine and on Jerusalem, clearly saying it's a neutral space, and its Jerusalem is clearly defined as a land of the Palestinians, right? So the world knows that. Why did they move the embassy there? So we already know, even in the peace in the Middle East, he's not going to engage in actually solving the problem of ending the genocide in Palestine, according to what the ICC and the ICJ has already stated. On the question of Ukraine and Russia, we will see. We will see actually how it will engage. I'm very curious to know
patiently waiting to see
what the policies will implement. But if I start thinking about the financial interests of the United States and the military interests of the United States, I don't think that the U.S. president has more weight to navigate in changing those policies overnight. My worry is not even that. My worry is more the crackdown on progressive forces in the United States. We saw the McCarthy era, where anyone who did not believe capitalism can actually change the society was in prison. I mean, even till today, we're in 2024. For those who want to become U.S. citizen, when you apply for citizenship, there is one question that's still there from that era. They ask you, have you ever been a member of the Communist Party USA? Why in 2024, an immigrant applying for citizenship of the United States has to be asked for that? This is something from the McCarthy era. So when we start studying history, we know how people were in prison. We know, for example, as in Ghana, W.E.B. Du Bois, who's buried here at the Du Bois Center, was lost his citizenship for being a communist. And he was an advisor to Kwame Nkrumah. He moved here. The same thing we're seeing now. Why am I bringing that up? It is under the Trump administration that the White House put a white paper, a policy paper, which is still on the White House website, around communism, making communism an enemy of the United States. I thought that it's an ideology that we can say we are going to fight to transform the society and bring better. You bring your ideas, I bring my idea, whichever one works, and so on. So when I'm seeing his attack on progressive forces in the United States, and those who may celebrate his presidency, I'm worried about what will happen to those who want to make sure that everyone in the United States has access to education, everyone in the United States has access to health care, and so on, and be labeled a communist, and next thing you know, you are killed or in prison or even expelled from the United States. Those are my worries for his presidency.
Now, largely, before we move to Africa, because the focus for today's show is to look at how his presidency affects Africa, to look at the United States of America's foreign policy with regards to Africa. I want us to talk about multilateralism or internationalism. Do you think that world leaders and, of course, analysts, especially analysts, have expressed worry that under Trump's presidency, multilateralism is at threat? What do you say to that? Given the fact that NATO, the US pulled out of NATO, and also most of the multilateral platforms, Trump has always had issues with them technically around the operations and a few other things. Do you think multilateralism is a threat under his presidency, given the fact that we've seen this play out before?
You asked me a difficult question, because if I say yes, but what should we worry about NATO being funded by the United States when we know NATO is responsible for the assassination of an African leader, Gaddafi, right? So I would worry about that. The multilateralism that I would be worrying about is the BRICS, right? The hope for an alternative to the Bretton Woods institution. How China, Brazil, South Africa, and India are giving African countries, or world countries, actually, not just African countries, an alternative to have a financial partner that helps in development. I do believe that under the Trump administration, there will be an attack on the BRICS institution to see that. But Trump is not a traditional politician. But he's very coherent in his policy. People see him as erratic. I don't see him as such. He's very calculated. He knows exactly what he wants. He may sound unintelligible, but you see that his campaign is moving forward. I'm looking forward to also see his chief of staff. I think her name is Wiles, if I'm not mistaken. She was in charge of his campaign. I think also DeSantis and a few, or even Mitt Romney. She ran the presidential campaign of Mitt Romney. And I'm seeing her as a lobbyist who knows Washington, who will be able to match his business acumen to the interests of the big lobbyist in Washington to continue U.S. foreign policy. It may not be the same in implementation, but in ideology, it will be the same on how it will engage multilateral institutions. He did say that he will try to cut funding also to some of the UN institutions. I do think he will do that. But we have to see how we implement that and what are the repercussions. Because for every single cut that he will make, every single change that he will make, he may isolate the United States more and more. This is why even when I'm looking at the struggle between, the competition between the US and China at the moment, I don't see how the United States can come out on top when even the US flag is made in China, right? So how do you even come out of that? Of course, they said that bring manufacturing and everything else, but China remains, I think they've surpassed the US economy at the moment. And it's a question of trade. You can trade fairly, you can find new trade partner, but we do not need a trade war which can actually take us to a World War III, which at least on the African continent will be much more affected, as we've seen what happened in World War I and World War II.
Indeed, we don't need that. Now, I'm coming to a very sensitive subject now, and it is one of the key things that I personally, would like to talk about on this show, because I want to find out, will a Trump administration champion or relax controversial policies such as gay rights or LGBTQ when it comes to the African continent? And I know that you are a human rights activist as well. What's your view? This is one of the questions that many have asked.
Will Trump reverse that in the United States? Is that a question, or toward his foreign policy?
Yes, foreign policy.
I'll find it very hard on the first part of the United States. I don't think he can reverse it, because even now.
But we know the stance of the Republicans when it comes to this particular issue.
What is the stand? I mean, in my view, what I've seen, even the Republicans within their own party have people who are from the LGBTQI community, right? Even this election, we have the first transgender member of Congress who was elected, right? So the United States is much different than on the African continent. That even if people have their own personal belief on the topics, there are laws that protect minorities in the United States. That one president can just come and change the law and say, no, this is what I'm going to do. He can put a executive order, which, if it is illegal, can be reverted. There are processes in the United States. So in the U.S., I find it very difficult how it can change that. Now, for its foreign policy, I don't think that the engagement of the Republican Party is similar to the engagement of the Democratic Party. Right? The Democratic Party have been very vocal on the issue of LGBTQI.
Right.
And even in the engagement with nations around the world, they make that as a trading or bilateral type of engagement. But each country has its path. Many African countries are going through their own contradictions, and they have to find themselves around this issue. What becomes very difficult, especially around the LGBTQI discussion, is that it's very polarized, right? It's not a straight discussion. Like, I'll speak, for example, for what I hear in Ghana. There is a discussion around gay marriage and being gay. Those are two different things, right? We do know that in Ghana and around the world, there are people who are gay. They exist, right? So when we discuss now gay marriage, it's a different discussion. Every single country have to figure out how to address that question. In the United States, they have made it legal, right? It went to the Supreme Court. They have the history, they have the practice, which has allowed them to arrive at us. Every single country around the world have that right to go through these processes and for the people to choose. My only worry around the discussion on LGBTQI is that it moves away from political discussion to harming individuals. And then the harming of individuals, some of them are our loved ones, our brothers, sisters, family members, right? Are people that we know. So it's how do we have a true and honest conversation about path forward for nations that is beyond just the rhetoric of what the politicians are saying. But I do believe that the Republican Party, at least from what I've seen, do not engage African nations or nations around the world by making that as a condition. But they do universally.
You don't
right?
think the Republicans made this like a condition for Africans to a certain extent?
They're not as aggressive as the Democrats, but they all in their engagement.
Sorry, the Democrats rather I meant. Like they have been very deliberate, and it's something that there are conditions when it comes to this particular subjects.
Yeah, that's why I've been trying to be precise, right? They are, in the discussion that I've seen and I've heard in Ghana, is around two things. People speak about LGBTQI and then also gay marriage. It's two different things. It is a fact that in Ghana, LGBTQI individuals exist, right? They're not going to disappear. They are in this country. Now there is a discussion around gay marriage. I think there is even a law that passed in the Ghanaian parliament, which the current president hasn't yet signed. So I'm assuming the next president or whoever is going to win on December 7th will sit down at the table and make a decision on what needs to happen with that. But when you read that bill, yes, some elements in it, even I am worried, right? I think one I saw in the bill, it was a banning marriage between an object and an individual. And I jokingly said to somebody, have I seen someone in Ghana marry a table, right? So you start wondering, like, where are those things? So, but those discussions have to be had with Ghanaians, right? They exist. But are we talking about gay marriage? If we're talking about gay marriage, let the people decide. So the vast majority of people, as I see in this country, are against it. So go through the process of making sure that gay marriage doesn't happen. But when it moves away from a political discussion and we start harming people for who they are, that's when, even as a human rights activist, I say, no, we are going too far. That, no, we are killing people, harming them, and beating them in the streets. That's not who we are. And then we have to understand where it comes from. Right? Who is inciting this discussion? Why is this discussion, right? Everybody is on one page, but the question of having clean water in Accra and resolving the Galamsey issue, we are not all on one page to end it. That no party so far I've seen have a clear position. When I'm saying the no party, I'm talking about the majority parties in this country, have really a plan to stop galamsey.
Often the morality policies receive a lot of attention than other social policies.
That is true, but the social affect the moral. You are not drinking clean water, how are you going to live? You can't have morality if you can feed your children. Why are we changing the minimum wage? We don't have power almost every day. I mean, I'm going into now local Ghanaian issues, but I'm saying that when we are talking about the Trump administration, specifically on the question on LGBTQI, the Republican Party in general have not engaged in this discussion as the Democrats do. It doesn't mean that they, within their own party, they support the issue. We have Republicans who are gay who are in parliament, right? We also have, in this past election, a transgender person who's now a member of Congress. That's the reality of the United States. For us in Ghana, or for us on the African continent, we have to go through our own processes and engagement to decide what is good for our people and how do we move forward with humanity on how we deal with one another.
Right. Okay. So now, can we talk about Trump working with African leaders? I've been taking information, bits and pieces from online, speaking to a few experts here and there on this particular subject about how things are going to pan out when it comes to Trump's relationship with the African continent. We do know that Trump and China are two countries that do not see eye to eye when it comes to certain things. Now, when it comes to trade, for instance, China has a huge presence on the African continent. China's relationship with Africa is very influential when it comes to this trading between these two countries. Now, America also is very much interested in ensuring that, if not to even get the trust of the African people at a certain level, at least what they have is maintained so they can continue with, you know, their relationship with their continent. How is this really going to play out when it comes to working with African countries? I read from his camp, one of his, somebody from his office said that Trump will be working with capable African leaders. Is African, or let me say, would you say African leaders are not too excited about Trump's win? In the past, he's made some unsavory comments, very unpleasant comments about the continent and the people, the leaders as well. Do you think things would change? Competition might actually affect some of these things when it comes to the continent.
Yeah, I mean, Trump is a populist. I don't follow what Trump says, I see what he does. No, you can't. Remember last time he was president, he used the S word to describe African countries, right? But at the same time, you have the American military on the African continent, right? I remember under his presidency, there were 4 Americans who were killed in Niger. One of them was a young African-American man where he had to call the family of the soldier who died, and he made some problematic statement to the mother that the son knew what he needed to sign up for. He knew what he was signing up for, that he could have been deployed somewhere and could have been killed, right? That was the debate in the United States. But when I was speaking to different people, I said that it's important for Americans to understand what just happened. It's not just a young black man in the United States was killed in Niger. I said, what are American soldiers doing in Niger? That should have been the larger discussion, right? So he didn't change anything from Barack Obama to his presidency. So he continued the military deployment of American soldiers, though he was trying to remove them from the Middle East, right? In some part of the Middle East, yet he dropped the bomb on Afghanistan, the mother of all bombs. So I don't pay attention about the rhetoric. The rhetoric that he shares is mostly for his base, and some of them often are uninformed. But we have to start
In
looking.
reality, will things change?
I don't think things will change in the Trump administration. I am very worried on the crackdown of the opposition to Trump. He's made that very clear that there will be a crackdown. I am worried for the continuous military engagement on the African continent. I am worried about the Lobito corridor. We spoke about the China-US trade war. Most people know about China's trade on the African continent. Ask any African, do they know anything about the Lobito corridor? Because when we speak about China, right, and this Chinese hysteria comes to China is exploiting Africa, they are colonizing Africa and everything else.
Neocolonialism and all of that.
You have on the White House website many documents around the investment into a railroad. The United States have invested over $1 billion to fix a railroad between Angola, Zambia, and DRC to ship copper and cobalt. And they are now hiding it. And no one is saying that the United States is colonizing Angola, Zambia, and DRC. Why? They're not fixing the railroad for people to move. They're actually saying that it's to have access to critical minerals. And you have billionaires such as the one who owns Ivanhoe Mines, Robert Friedland, who in the beginning of 2024 had his first shipment of copper from the DRC arriving in the United States through that railroad in Baltimore in January, about 1,000 tons. How many people are saying that the U.S. is actually doing that? So for us on the African continent, when we are not talking about Trump and trade, how he's going to engage with our capable leaders, we should say, what are the policies of our leaders to transform our continent? And who are we going to work with to fix the potholes in the roads in Accra, to bring the clean water, to provide electricity to the entire country, to actually have our Banku, that's now 5 CD, go back to 1 CD, right? So those are the things that we should worry about. And until our leaders take this sovereign stance, and it's not all African leaders who are taking this stand I'm talking about. I mean, when I'm looking at Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, you can see there is a transformation, that these leaders are thinking much more differently about resource management, providing for the people, and so on. So it's how do we get that Kruma's movement, that people are start thinking first for the people? Can we make our own clothes? Can we do agriculture for our people who have the knowledge? I mean, we are discussing China. They have the technology today of the hybrid rice, that even the UN has said that this is the best rice in the world. People are dying for not accessing food. And we will listen to Donald Trump and who we have to trade, rather than saying what is good for our people. We have the Cuban doctors, right? The Cubans have some of the best medical schools. Even US citizens go to Cuba to study medicine. And we have a challenge with our hospitals here. Can we have more Africans be trained by medical doctors from Cuba? And I can go on and on, right? Because even here we see we have many trading partners. Turkey is trading with Ghana, the Emirates trading with Ghana, and so on. But how do we support the local production so that we don't depend on what the U.S. president is going to be? We are the heart. They are sneezing, but we are pumping the blood.
They are sneezing, but Africa is pumping the blood. Now, let's talk about this issue. I think after that, we can start wrapping up for today's show. Let's talk about, Kambali, let's talk about Trump's favorite tagline, America First. America First. I didn't want us to start the conversation on that note because I knew a lot of things were going to feed into that tagline. So I was just waiting to address it at the last part of the show. Now, America First. Is that a good thing? Is it a good thing first and foremost? Let me ask, is it a good thing for any leader to take into consideration their interest before opening the door for others to come in? Is that a good trait for any leader?
Trump doesn't represent the American people. I hope that we have to pass on that information very clearly, right? Let's go back to the numbers. We have over 300 million Americans, 74 million voted for him, and 70 million voted for Harris. Most Americans do not reflect that image of America first. The challenge of the American citizen today is the bread and butter issue. They want to make sure that the children are safe at home, they can provide for them, they have access to education and health care, and a decent wage that can also make the aspiration. That's what the American citizen is worrying about, right? And he exploited this situation to be able to be where he is. Now let's look at his slogan, America First. America First for the billionaires. Because that's what I'm about to say, for who? I know the answer. It's for the Elon Musk. People are not finding it very bizarre that a billionaire decided to give 100 American citizens.
But America First resonates with the people deeply.
No, it doesn't. That's what I'm continuing to say. What we see in the election result is that there is a segment of the population who have felt disenfranchised. In the statistic, we say white men and white women voted the most for Donald Trump. Black men, the majority of them did not vote for him. Black women did not vote for him, the majority of them, including other immigrants, right? The Latinos and other, when you start going down the demographics. So those who voted for him, then you have to start studying what is happening in the United States. The demographic that voted for him is a declining demographic in the United States. Since 2010, it's been shown that by 2035, whites are going to become the minority in the United States. So the America First, Make America Great Again, is to latch on to this notion that there is the other. And as long as it can gravitate toward that and push that segment of the society to believe that they are in threats, and that that group actually control some electorate, of course, we will have the result that we see. But it's not the vast majority of American citizens. Will that work? We live in a global world.
Will that work?
I don't think that it will work because, one, the United States is behind on science, right? They are behind on even technology. I'll quote, I don't want to quote him, but I'm going to quote Tim Cook, the Apple CEO. I think a few months back, he did an interview where the question on China came in, that will Apple produce their iPhone in the United States? It was very fascinating response he gave because it was around this question of China-US competition. And he said that the reason why Apple goes to China is because of the precise tooling that China has, that the United States today, to get that precise tooling, it's going to take them a few decades to get to that capacity.
Right.
At the moment, they do not have. Right? They will say that it will have 1 million people specialized in putting actually the iPhone. So for me, the best way for the United States to actually address this situation is actually to open the borders. Is actually to bring in immigrants.
But to regularize the immigrants.
But what is the issue of the immigrant? And that's where there is a myth about how people come to the United States, right? Of course, we have people who are undocumented who cross the borders. But the vast majority of Americans coming to the United States are not coming in illegally, right? Two, these immigrants, undocumented immigrants, pay taxes. What happened to the taxes? Because there is this assumption that having these undocumented immigrants coming into the United States, that they are taking the jobs, they're benefiting from resources. That is not true. They're actually paying taxes. And third, for my personal belief, the world shouldn't have borders. I should be able to go to Burkina Faso and live in Burkina Faso as long as I'm respecting the people of the land and the people who are able to accept me in the community. I should be able to move that way, because creating the borders, especially for us on the African continent, we know that it doesn't make sense. I'm going to Niger, people of Niger speak Hausa. I'll go to Nigeria, they speak Hausa. I'm here in Ghana, people are speaking Hausa. Why do we have these borders? And we're separating one another with these borders? Because nation states have been created to make sure that the person will look like you, who have the same blood. When I'm sick, you need my blood, I'll need your blood, right? For transfusion if needed. Yet, I'm seeing as another in the case of immigration. The regulation of immigration is not going to solve the issue that here in Accra, right here at the corner of our Belém Pejowulu light, the Canadian are advertising for Ghanaians to go for better pasture there. When they arrive, there is a different story.
Right, okay. So Kambali Musavuli is, has been joining us on the show. We've been talking about America's foreign policy, with regard to Africa under the president-elect, Mr. Trump. And we've been looking at some of the initiatives between the African continent and America. America has been seen to operate from an arm's length most of the time. Now that we have China also running things on the African continent, you know, and they seem to have a lot of influence on the African continent, we hope that that might influence the way America see Africa. And going forward, we can have... There are some initiatives that in the past, previous administrations have carried when it comes to relations between even Ghana and the United States of America. And I remember that Trump also introduced quite a few, and there have been issues around AGOA. Of course, people are worried, or let me say, industry players are worried about what is going to be the fate of AGOA. And I think all of this, we've done a good job by touching on some of these concerns raised by the people. Hopefully we will have the opportunity. But I have questions. I have actually, I have some views shared by some people. We don't have the luxury of time, so I cannot take everything, but this one I'm going to read. This is coming all the way from the United States of America, and this person is watching us and said, so the current White House, which he believes is the best, and I think he's referring to you, has on their website about the railroad project, but that's Trump's fault. Obama deployed soldiers to Niger, and when Trump came to power, wanted to remove them from there. Some got killed, and what Trump said obviously got taken out of context because his wife came out to clarify it. Yet it's Trump's fault. And he goes on to say the people of the United States, over 75 million, voted for him, and you still insist that that doesn't reflect the image of America? Well, that's someone's view concerning the fact that this number of people cannot really, you know, when we say America first, these are people who really wanted to have Trump in power to be able to, you know, champion their interest for them. Yeah. But like I said, we have quite a number of messages coming in, but we can't take all of them for the sake of time. Let's talk about your program before we leave. I think we have 2 minutes to go, and I want to talk about your program. Listen, so my guest, Kambali Musavuli, is the host of Carrefour African. Did I get the name right? We are in a francophone country, aren't we? We are. You know, it is the only foreign show, if I can put it that way, on Ghana's media landscape. Yeah. It is, and it's on Pan-African television. Indeed, indeed. Tell us more, a bit about this. So Carrefour African in English means Africa Crossroads. We are looking at the African continent now in the same prism as we looked at it in the 1960s, where there are a lot of independence movement taking place now. It's more an economic independence movement taking place. So we are at the crossroad where we can decide to go right or to go left. And my hope is that we are going to go left. And that we are going to be progressives fighting for Pan-Africanism of the people. So the show tried to say that at the crossroads of our lives on the African continent, using Pan-Africanism as our compass, what is happening in our country to bring our people to the Pan-Africanism of the people. And the show is in French, and it airs here on Pan-African TV Wednesday to Friday. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I have been monitoring, and I think it's a very good show. Thank you so much. And I'm happy that this airs right